the threats that were mouthed by Dmitry Medvedev, former leader of Russia. He's not an especially powerful leader in Russia now, but it was pretty striking stuff, talking about the threat of assassination to British officials, and that presumably meant politicians too, and generals, people like you, Richard, Lord Dannatt.
Yes, but Medvedev is not known for holding back on his words. As we know, he was president for a while, but he's now in a much more junior position. But he's got quite a track record for speaking out and speaking his mind. Yes, he's lashing out at what he regards as inappropriate remarks made by James Cleverly, our Foreign Secretary.
Yeah.
Of course, we've got to take those kind of threats seriously. But this, of course, is nothing new for British officials or senior military officers. We all grew up with that during the IRA years and difficult times in the past. So people are used to taking sensible precautions and looking after their own security, and indeed being protected where it's appropriate. But I think things are becoming to a pretty poor pass if countries like Russia start to try and assassinate and knock off British officials and invite a sort of rather ridiculous tit-for-tat operation coming along. I mean, we're used to diplomatic spats and officials being thrown out of one country and another. But I think threatening assassination, let alone carrying out the threat of assassination, would be really taking the thing to quite another level.
Yeah, I was talking to a former speechwriter to President Putin just a short while ago here on the programme, and he thought it was an implausible idea because it would be seen as such an extreme act on Russia's side that it could lead to even a coup against Vladimir Putin. That sort of provocation to Britain would be beyond contemplation. That was his thought. That's pretty much your view too.
It is, and I think Putin needs to be very careful about perceptions of his ability and capability and what he's doing. We can only really follow elements of what the Russian people are being told, but I think there's quite a lot of evidence that certainly parts of public mood in Russia is turning against Putin, turning against him for more than one reason. I mean, there are those who don't disagree with the war, but disagree with the way that he's fought it. And there are clearly others who disagree with the war and disagree with the position that he's taken with regard to Ukraine. So I think Putin is increasingly going into a corner. And, well, let's just wait and see what happens when the Ukrainians mount their much anticipated counteroffensive.
Yes.
This could put real pressure on Vladimir Putin.
Yes. I just want to go back to the comment from James Cleverly, the Foreign Secretary, that gave rise to this comment from Medvedev. Do you believe that Cleverly, the Foreign Secretary, was right to support the right of Ukraine to strike Russia on its own territory? After all, what's Russia been doing since last February?
Well, I think that's exactly the point. I mean, it's a bit rich for any right-minded person to take the view that whereas Russia seems to be allowed to get away with bombing Kyiv, droning Kyiv on a fairly regular basis, and freewheeling over other parts of Ukraine, and have done so since the 22nd of February last year, and then to cry foul when Ukraine takes some countermeasures on places in Russia. Now, Kyiv is being quite canny, I think, with sort of very fingers crossed behind their back, denying that actually it was them. But it's as I say, it's rather rich for people to say this is not appropriate for Ukraine or Ukrainian sympathizers to take some action in Russia itself.
Is it a correct distinction? Because it is the distinction that's drawn by powers such as the USA and here in the UK, that we will support and arm and supply Ukraine in defense of its own territory against the Russian invader, but we do not want our munitions, our ordnance, to be used to strike targets in Russia. Is that a necessary distinction?
I think it's a very sensible distinction, and I think it's a distinction worth repeating time and again. What we don't want to see is a Royal Air Force, ex-Royal Air Force Storm Shadow missile, or casements of it or parts of it showing up deep into Russia, because I think that just plays into the narrative that becomes much easier for the Russian media to trumpet, that this is the West attacking Russia. This is most definitely not the West attacking Russia. This is the West supporting another democratic country, Ukraine, that wants to stand up for its own rights. Now, if Ukrainians, with their own equipment, their own manufactured drones or their own shells or whatever else they want to do, special forces parties want to carry the fight into Russia, that I think is up to Ukraine to do. But I think it's absolutely right that Western countries stand back from that. We should support them defend their country. If they choose to take the fight into Russia, then I think that is quite properly their business.